All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the third session of this Python Hackathon series. And just give me a second to get started. Um, I apologize for keeping my video off. I have um, I have a eye allergy, and it's kind of gross, so I don't want you guys to see any of that. So I'll be keeping my video off for this session. But if you have any questions, please put that in the chat. So before we begin for our this session, I'll give you guys a recap of what we did in the last session. So in the last session, we learned about list and we learned how to like add things to a list, how to create a list, how to remove things to a list, and set different things to different values within a list. We also learned how to put list within list. Then we moved on to tuples. We learned that tuples are not changeable, so you cannot change a value within a tuple once it is created. But we did learn some loopholes about tuples where we saw like if we have a list within a tuple, we can change the list, but we cannot change the tuple itself. Then we also learned about dictionaries. So in dictionaries, we basically combine lists and tuples. And it's dictionaries are a little confusing, but once you get a hang of it and like learn how to use them, it's quite helpful. So, does anyone have any questions with anything we did last week or like the session before anything before we start with today's class? Okay, so let's start today. So today we have quite a lot of things to learn, and we didn't get through everything we had to last class. So I'm going to be going a little quick on each of the topics. So please let me know if you have any questions or if I skip any topics that you want more or like if I skip explaining like the topic clearly. All right. So first thing we're going to learn today are if and else statements. So if and else statements are basically kind of like conditions you can think of it where it's like if this thing is true then you're going to implement this type of code, but if it's not true or if something else is true then you're going to implement something else. So let's take for example x, right? We're going to say x equals to 100, and then we're going to make a if statement. So if it's just you say if and then you say whatever you want to say. So let's say if x is greater than 100, then colon, to like, this is like proper syntax to define like a if statement. One second. Just give me 1 minute. Let me just get one thing right now. What is this? Okay, so if, and then let's say we say print, and then we're gonna say x is greater than 100, right? And then we're gonna say, then we can do, so there's two types of things after if. There's a elif and there's a else statement. So elif, it allows you to put another condition in there. So let's say like you have like 4 or 5 conditions. So you would say elif. So like this means that if this is not true, if this is true, then print this. So let's say if x is, let's say if x is greater than 200. So x is greater than 200, then print x is greater than 200, right? And then we can say else. So, and then else, you don't have a statement because it's just like last resort. We can say print x is less than 100. So what this basically does before we run this is it's gonna run through this x is the variable, right? It's asking, it's like in the conditions everywhere. So it's gonna say first, it's gonna look at the if statement on line 3, and it's gonna say, okay, is x greater than 100? Is if it is, then it's gonna print this out. Now, it's then if it's not true, then it's gonna look at this. It's gonna say, okay, is x greater than 200? If it's not, then it's gonna skip to that and it's gonna run this part because it's else. There's no other condition to it. It has to run this, okay? So when we run this, it prints x is less than 100. Why? Because over here it says greater than 100, not greater than or equal to. So that means that x is, because x is 100 and it's not bigger than 100, it's gonna run this. But now if we were to say like x is greater than or equal to, so how to type that? We would say greater than or equal to like this, and then it prints greater than 100. So like when you look when you code, keep it in mind. If you want to include like whatever number you have right here, you use the equals, so like greater than equals right here, and it's gonna look at it as 100 or above. But if you just have greater, then it's not gonna count 100, it's gonna be above the value. So like if we say 150, it's gonna be greater than 100. Now we say 290, it's gonna be greater than, oh, oh, so yeah, this is also one thing where I did like a coding error. So you guys could like keep this in mind. So here, technically, if we were to look at it, it's supposed to say this, right? Because x is greater than 200. But the thing we did was, or I did, was that I put x is greater than 100, right? So when it sees this and it sees, okay, x is already 100, so it's just going to execute this statement and be done with it. It's not going to like print any of this, it's not even going to check this because this is already true. So it's going to skip over everything because x is 100, right? So if we were to change this to x is less than, now it's going to go here because this is false and then this is true, so it prints this out. Any questions on if else statements? Or any questions with this? Then we're going to move on to a little bit more about if else statements. Okay. Um, so give me 1 second. I'm going to pull something up, which is going to explain the other functionalities of the if and else statements. Okay. Um, this one right here. So these are all the different things that you can put into. So this is kind of like operators in Python. Okay. So you remember like how we did plus, minus, then we did multiplication, division, and like modulus, which takes the remainder of something. So what happens is that Python has like a set. So you remember in like math class, you guys learned about like order of functions where you have to do parentheses first, then multiplication, division, and then after that at the end you do addition and subtractions. So Python works kind of like that. So there's multiple things you can do in Python. It doesn't have to be only greater than. There's things like and, there's not, or there's or. So like equals equals. So let's say this. We can say if x equals, we're gonna change x to 100, right? We're gonna say if x is greater than 100, print x is greater than 100. Or actually, we're gonna do it this way. So we're gonna say equals equals. then we're gonna say x is greater, and else x is less than 100, and then we're gonna change this to 100 and there you go. So what this does is equals equals checks whether value of x is equal to what we have right here. So it doesn't equal with one equals because remember one equal sign denotes like this thing is equal to like defining like the variable. So when you have to check if this is equal to this, then you use two equals. So it checks if x is equal to this, then that, and then it prints x is equal to 100. Now if we change this to like 101, it's gonna be greater. And then if we change this to like 80, it's gonna be less than 100. So that's one thing with checking equals equals. The other thing there is you can also do this with, let's say, a string. So I'm just gonna remove this for a second. And then let's say we put hello. And then you want to check if x is equal to hello. So you could say hello like that. And then you could say if x is this, and then I'm not going to change this just to save time, but you say it runs it. So it also works with string. Doesn't always have to be like a number. You could do it with strings or Boolean. You could say like x is true, and you could say if x. You don't even have to say any of this. So it's like it uses Boolean because it's already true, right? So it's basically like when you say like x equals 100, it's checking, okay, x, it puts 100 over here, and then 100 equals 100. Is 100 equals to 100 true? If true, then it's going to run this. If it's false, then it's going to run whatever's on the bottom, or just skip through it and run the rest of the code. So basically, when we do this, and then we're just using Booleans, we could say if true. So if true, then just run this. You don't have to say like if x equals to true because we already have true, and it's gonna run that. Now, if we change this to false, and then I'm just gonna print like a done just to show like it's gonna skip over this just for like clarification. So it's not gonna print any of this. It's gonna print done. Why? Because x is false over here, so it doesn't have to like run anything with false. It's just false. So just skip over it. You know? Okay. The next thing we could check is multiple conditions. So let's say we want to check like someone's age. So in order to be a teenager, you have to be like equal to 13 but less than 18. So anywhere like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So we could code that with an if statement, right? So we could say x equals to, let's say, your age. So let's say 14. Now we could say if x is greater than equal to 13, then we could do and. So and is denoted by two and symbols, which is shift 7 if you want to like check it on your keyboard. And you could say x is less than 18. Then you could say you are a teenager. So then, one second. So then when you're, what? Oh, it's just a single and. I apologize for that. It's just a single and in Python. In other languages, you have to use two ands. So it runs that, and as you are a teenager. So what this does is that, let's say if we were to put this to 19, what's that? What? One second. Okay, there you go. So I guess this one right here is it doesn't work right now. It has like other functions to it. So you could also use and right here. So this is on like the lowest. So what this does is technically kind of like it's the same as like the and symbol. So in like Java, instead of typing and, you would type two of like these symbols, which represents and. But since we're in Python, I guess we're gonna use and. So what this does now is that because so 19 is greater than 13. So this part is true, but on the left side, 19 is not less than 18, so it becomes false. So it's technically looking at if true and false, print this. So because true and false becomes false because it's an and. So what and basically means is that both sides needs to be true. It can't be like one side is true, one side is false, then it's going to be false. It has to be both sides are true. So since right side is false and left side is true, it's going to call it false, and then it's going to say you're a teenager or you're not a teenager, and it's going to skip over it. Same thing if we do it with 12, it's not going to run. Why? 12 is less than 18, but it's not greater than 13, so this side would be true, this is false. And then if we were to do 15, it prints it out. Why? Because it's true on the left side and it's true on the right side. Now, you could do like the either or, which means you could do or, and you could say, if we say 12, it's going to say you are a teenager. Why? Because we're using or. So or means like either a side has to be true. So it doesn't matter which side is true, just one side has to be true. So because this side's false, but this side's true, it's gonna run no matter what. Why? Because this is true, so it doesn't matter if this is false, because one side has to be true with or. It doesn't have to be both. Same thing, if you do 19, it's still gonna run. Why? Because right is left is true, but right is false. Now it's gonna if you do 15, it's still gonna run. Why? Because both sides are true this time. So true equals true, right? Now you don't have to. So technically, this one is always going to be true no matter what, since you coded it this way. But you could say we could do less than 15, and then how do you make this full? So we could do x is less than this and less than that, and if we do 16, it's gonna skip over it because both of it are false. Just example. This is like a really bad example, but just like a quick example. And then the last thing we're going to use with if and else is a not statement. So there's two ways to write it. One is exclamation mark, and then we could say if not. One second. Yeah, this should work. Okay, we're gonna do it this way. Okay, we're gonna run it this way, and so okay, um, okay, so this is kind of like a quick example of how not works. So not can be defined with an exclamation mark, or you could say not as in like NOT. Both work. It depends on like the type of use on how you're using it. So a not is basically it turns like you know how we did like if X is true, then not. So like X is true, then this is gonna run true. So X basically the exclamation mark, whenever you have to always put it in front of whatever your parameter or operator is, right? So it basically turns a true into false and a false into true. So X is 16, so it's gonna say if 16 is not equal to 15, number 16. So number is 15. So what if we do 15? So it's gonna skip over. Why? Because if so it's basically running if 15 is not 15. So it's like 15 is not 15. It turns it into false because 15 is 15. So it skips over. But anything other than 15, you could say like anything. So we could say 30, right? So 30 is not equal to 15, number 60. Okay. So another example of this would be if you were using true and then you're saying like when you say this. So you're saying like number is 16 because true. Now, if we were to put this in parentheses and then put exclamation mark outside, uh, okay. So when we do this, we have to use not. Yeah. So over here, what's happening is that because X is true and it's in the parentheses, and then you have a not outside, so it kind of does like order of operations. So it works in order of operation, where it does whatever there is inside the parentheses first, then it's gonna put the not statement at the outside. So what it's doing right here is because X is true, but then it negates it, so it makes it false. So it skips over this because it's false, even though X is true. So a good rule of thumb you can like or a general way to remember when to use and or like when to use not instead of like the exclamation mark is kind of like if you're comparing like a boolean or every time you have to like use it like something inside the parentheses, put not on the outside. But if you're just doing like when we did before, where you're comparing like a number to a different number, or if you're comparing like like a string to a string, so we can say like hello, and then um, not equals hi. So whenever you're like directly comparing only one thing, you could use an exclamation mark in front of like a equals. But if you're like negating a whole statement, then say not and then put a parenthesis. So one example of this could be, so like to make this a little bit more efficient, let's say like you have multiple things. So let's say you want to like code a program where it checks uh if you can go outside. So let's say in order for you to go outside and play, you have to complete all your homework, you have to complete all your chores, and you have not and it's not raining outside. Let's say the weather is nice. So how would we code that? So let's code that. Okay. So in order to code that, we're gonna define three variables first. So we're gonna say weather, and then we're gonna say I'm gonna define them all afterwards. I'm just gonna type the variables first. So we're gonna say weather, then we're gonna say homework, and we're gonna say chores. Now, is weather nice outside? Let's say it is. So we're gonna say true. It's good. And then only is weather, or we're gonna say good weather. And then we'll call it true. Then homework equals to done. So we're gonna say homework done, and then chores done. Okay. So kind of like that. So let's say homework, did you do your homework? Let's say yeah, you did. And then we're gonna say, did you do your chores? Let's say you didn't do your chores. Now, how would we code this? As in, like, in order to be able to go outside, you have to meet all of these criteria, right? So you could kind of do if, and you could say good weather and homework done and chores done. Then, Fred, you can go outside enjoy. Then we could do else you cannot go outside because you didn't complete all your work. And then when you run that, it says you can go outside. What is it? What? Oh, yeah. So it says you cannot go outside because you didn't complete your work. Why? Because this is false. So not everything is true, right? But if we were to change this to a true, then you can go outside. So the other thing you can do is, let's say only two things have to be done instead of the three. So the weather has to be good at all times, right? But let's say you can go outside if you have one of these things done. So either homework or chores. So what you could do is you could put a parentheses between this, and let's say if you put or, right? So remember, it's kind of just like math. Um, use this chart to your advantage. Actually, this is not like we could use this chart, right? So what these charts basically show you is well, this chart in particular, what it shows you is like the precedence. Is like the technical term, but you could think of it as in like the importance of completion, like what order should it completed it. So like the things on the bottom is that it's like lowest priority. So it's in like a set of directions. These stuff at the bottom is what's going to be run at last. That's what Python's going to interpret at the last. First, it's going to do all of this stuff on the top. So any addition is going to be done before it like does any like comparison with like and or like not and everything. So these are like comparisons. So you could do like this. So what happens is, remember, like it's kind of like math where anything in the parentheses gets done first, then whatever's outside the parentheses. So what this statement basically is going to do is it's going to say, it's going to look at it from left to right, but it's going to also do this before it like prints out anything. So it's going to say, is weather good? It is good. Yes. It's done. It's going to execute whatever's inside here. So it's going to be like, so it's going to do like whatever's inside the parentheses first when it sees a statement. So it's going to be, is your homework done? Or your this. So is one of these complete? If there is, then it becomes true. Then it says true and is the weather good. So true and true equals true, then it passes on. Now, if these both are false, then it's going to be like true and false, false. So you cannot do it. So example of this, let's change this back to false. You didn't do your chores, but you can still go outside. Why? Because your homework is done, so it becomes true, and then this is also true. So it like runs the statement. And then if so example of that would be if we turn both of these false, then you cannot go outside because you didn't do one of your work. And this is false, so both of these becomes false. So true and false becomes false, so you cannot go outside. Now, if you were to say these both are true, but this is false, then it still wouldn't run. Why? Because even though this is true, the left side isn't true, it's false, so it's not gonna run. So you could use that. There's like other things you could do to like make it a little bit more complex, but that's kind of like the general idea of if and else statements and then like elifs, and you can like add a whole bunch of conditions and try it. So I know it's been like a lot. So if you have any questions, please put that in the chat. And why don't you guys take 5 minutes and try out like these statements, try to get a hang of the if and else statements, and then we're gonna go on to other things. All right, 5 minutes. Okay. Welcome back. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. So let's move on. Now we're gonna do for loops and while loops. So before we kind of did kind of like conditions, right? Now we're gonna do iteration. Iterations like looping through something like many times. So yeah. Okay. So let's start with while loops. So what loops are basically is that for like set amount of time when like one condition's true, it's gonna repeat like one thing over and over and over again. So let's say like a quick example of this for a while loop is like let's say x equals to 0. Now we can say while x is less than let's say 20, then print x, then x plus equals 1. So what this basically means is while x is less than 20, we want Python to print the value of x, then add 1 to x. When we run this, it prints 0 to 19. So what's basically happening right here is, or one thing you have to be really careful about is not to make an infinite loop. So because this a while loop is gonna run forever until like this statement becomes false. If let's say we were not to do this, it's gonna make an infinite loop. It's just gonna keep going. It's never gonna change the value. It's never gonna stop. So this is an infinite loop. Don't you don't want to try this because it can like really mess up your program. And in like some cases, it's like impossible to stop a full infinite loop, which could like ruin your program. So make sure that there isn't what is it called? Sorry, there isn't an infinite loop. Okay, so this is like a really quick example. So there's like multiple types of like things you could do in while loop. So one thing is that everything we did in a if statement. So when we learned about like and operators, not equals to equal equals, like like all of that. So you could use all of those conditions in a while loop and a for loop. So we're going to be doing for loops in a bit. So you could do all of those. So for example, we could say, um, let's say while x is less than 20 and x is greater than 3, print x. And then if we were to run this, it's not going to run anything right now. Why? Because it's 0. So it's less than 20, yes, but it's not greater than 3. So because it's like true, false, it becomes false. All of that works, same thing. Same like before. So if we were to put 5, it's going to print it till 19. So this one of these statements becomes false as a general idea. Okay. So other thing you could do is that you can now these are called like nested if statements and like nested for loops and while loops. So this is kind of like a little bit more like complex out of Python where it gets like it starts getting confusing if you're not like careful with like indentation. So like how every time we're like indenting. So the reason why indentation is like really important in Python or like in any language, in programming language generally, is that it helps you organize your code. So Python itself is quite intensive and it's like it requires indentation a lot because it doesn't involve like a lot of parentheses to be used. And other languages, you have to use like a lot of parentheses. So indentation, if you have like one line out of like indentation, it wouldn't like ruin your program, but it could mess up your program in Python because like Python is made for like it's made for like easy use and like to be learned a lot quicker, but it's also has like a lot of drawbacks as in like if I were to like let's say I'm not indenting this properly, it's gonna give me an error because it's like a line indentation, so it's not like able to process this one and like it's not like incorrect indentation. So make sure your indentation is correct. But what I mean by like you can do nested for loops is we can say while true. We don't even have to say anything else. Or actually, let's do it this way. We can say while this, and then we're gonna just say while x is true. We can do x equals to print one. And then we're gonna say x if x equals let's say 20. Then we're gonna say print. Actually, we're just gonna say x equals false. And then we're gonna say okay, and then we're gonna have to change this because since x is a boolean, we cannot have like boolean and add that. So we're gonna say we're gonna print y equals 0. We're gonna make another variable, print y, and we're gonna do same thing we did with x before. So we're gonna do plus equal 1. And then okay, 1 second. If y is okay, there you go. Okay, so what basically happens in this program or like in this like loop is that we have x equals to true. So what's gonna happen is gonna run the program line by line. So it's gonna prints y, then it adds 1 to y. So now y equals to 1, and then it checks is y equals to 20. So no, it doesn't. So it skips this part and then it runs again. So it checks. Okay, is x still true? It is still true. So it keeps running it again and again till y equals 20. So when y equals to 20, it checks, okay, y equals 20. So this is true. So it's going to run the if statement. So it's going to say, it's going to put x equals to false. So when it changes x equals to false, and then it comes back up to here, and it's going to check, okay, is x still true? No, x is not true. It's false because this has changed. So it's going to stop the program because this part is false. So there's no more running the program. So it stops right here. Makes sense? Are we good with that? Any questions? So I'm just giving you guys like, so, okay. So this is just like a simple example. You could do like and like we could use this example too. So you could say like if we wanted to, we could say like use these. So let's just use these to like show you guys what I mean. So we're gonna uncomment this part out, and then let's say while good weather, and we're gonna say homework done. Print y, x this, and all that. This is good. Now if y equals to 20, let's say we're gonna do good weather equals false. So same thing, we're not using x anymore, so we can kind of get rid of the x. And then when we run this, oh, why is it not running? Oh, sorry about that. This was already false, so that's why it wasn't running, because there's no point of running. So yeah, now you see over here is that because good weather is still true, and then homework is still true, it's gonna run all of this. When y equals to 20, it's gonna change good weather to false. So it's gonna be like false and true. So it's gonna become false. So it skips over this. That's it. Program is ended. So you could do that. Then you can like also do like the example we did of good weather and we're gonna put in parentheses homework done or chores done. And then we're going to do y equals to 20, then we could say, instead of changing whether, we could do homework done equals to false. So now what happens is we create an infinite loop. Why? Because as we remember, see, now because we created an infinite loop, it's going to be really hard for us to stop this program because it's going to keep going. It's not want to stop. So it takes a long time. So like if you were to do this in like real life and like you're not using like a platform or using a different platform, it could crash your computer. Computer crashing would be like really bad, or like it's gonna be like rare, but it could crash your program, which can be bad if you're not like saving your program or stuff. But over here, it becomes an infinite loop because this is an or statement. So if one of these is false, it doesn't really matter because as long as the other one's true. So we're never like changing chores done. We're only changing homework done. So what we can do is we could do it keeps running, then we could do like if y equals 50, we could do chores done equals false. Now when we run it, it runs till 50 and then it stops. So what happens is that it changes homework to be false when y is 20, but it still keeps running because chores is true. So when y equals to 50, we change chores to be false. So now since both of these are false, it's going to be true and false. So it's going to false and then stops the program. So that's kind of like what while loops are. So it just one thing to keep in mind in while loops is that don't accidentally create a while of infinite loop. So always make sure whenever before running your program, always make sure that at the end of your while loop, whenever you want to stop it, there's one way or like multiple ways in your program where you have like your condition to be so like where you're changing your condition so the while loop can be stopped. So it doesn't have to be like in line, like your second line or your third line. It could be wherever inside the while loop. Just make sure that you have something there that would like run and like stop the while loop whenever like you don't need the while loop. Just don't like run it without, like putting these conditions because it's gonna keep running forever. Just keep that in mind. Don't create an infinite loop because that could be really bad. Okay. Anyone, any questions on while loops before we go into for loops? Okay, since we're running low on time, I'm gonna really quickly speed through for loops, and then we were supposed to also go into like input methods. So I will go over that in next class. So let's really quickly speed over how for loop works. So in order to do for loop, the basic syntax is for something, right? So a variable x in and there's multiple conditions. So we're just gonna do a simple range one, and let's see like 1 to comma 10. So what this means is from range where x equals to 1, so this is kind of like assigns the value of x. Make sure x is not like whenever you're range using a range function, make sure you're not using x that is like already defined above. Make sure that it's a different variable other than something above. And then tilde this. So what basically this does is that when we run this, we could say print x. So it's gonna print x from 1 through 9. So it doesn't include 10. It's anything under than 10. So not including 10. So if we were to print 10, we would have to add 1 to this. So we're gonna have to do x plus 1 technically. So it this is kind of like a simple while loop, or like it's kind of like a while loop, but you know how in while loop we had to like have x above, then say while x is true, then this, then plus x. So it kind of like reduces the amount of code we have in terms of lines, where we can just say like, okay, we want to print the numbers from 1 through 10. So we're gonna say for x in range 1 through 11, print x. So it's like x equals to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it just keeps going till whenever you stop. The other thing you can do is you can make it count by numbers. So you could say like comma, and you could put a third parameter in, and you could say 2. So what this does is it skips by 2. So it counts by 2. So 1, 3, 5, 9, and so on till 99. So not 100 because it's like less than 100. So it's gonna start at 1, and then it's gonna count by 2. So 1, 3, 5, 9, and like so on. You could do um you could do times 2, x times 2. Um, x is not defined. Okay, I'm not sure why this is not happening, so we're just gonna keep it by 2 for now. Just keep it straight and simple. Let's not complicate it too much, but that's like simple. So now another thing you guys need to like keep in mind is all of this also works with a list. So what like for loops are really beneficial is in a list. So let's say you wanted to print out like all the things in your list. So we're gonna create a simple list, and we're gonna put countries in it. So we're gonna put USA. We're gonna put sorry, France. We're gonna put say Japan, India, Russia, Canada. So now when we print a list traditionally, and then I'll get rid of this. So when we were traditionally print this, you know how it prints everything in like just one line? So what for loops can be really beneficial is it can do for x in, you could do just list, and then you could say print x. And then, okay, let's get rid of that for now. So now it prints everything in one by one. So what it basically does is it takes the first thing in the list, USA, and it assigns that to the value of x. Now you can change, you could do whatever you want with that. The same thing. Then it after whatever's inside your for loop is done, it takes X as France, then Japan, so on, and it keeps going down the list. So this is like really useful for like whenever you have to do any calculations, let's say, where you can like you want to do like down the list. So you can want to like let's say you want to count how much variables there is in a list. So you could do like create a y equals to 0. So I'm just gonna create a simple program here for you guys. I'm just gonna get rid of this to make it like a little bit more neat to understand. So we're gonna say for x equals 10 less, then we're gonna say y plus equals 1. Then outside the for loop, we're gonna say print length of the list is then string y. So it says length of the list is 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Of course, this is like a I gave you guys like a long example. If you wanted to like ever print out like the list of the length, you could always use like the length function. So if you do this, that also prints out 6. I was just showing you how this like a for loop works, but and there's if you ever need to like know like the length of a list, this is a neat little function, len list. It gets you like a length of any list you want. I was just showing you how this works, so I coded it a long way. But that's kind of like for loops. So it could be pretty useful. So let's say another thing you could do is let's say you wanted to use this, but within a certain parameter or like some values of the list. Yeah, it's not gonna work this way. Okay, that doesn't work. Okay, yeah. So you have to do it this way, but you could do like let's say how are we gonna change it? But yeah, we could do like, um we could create a lot of programs. I don't want to like I'm trying to like think of coding something really simple since we don't have too much time because I don't want to like create something like really complex for you guys and like confuse you. Because this thing can get really confusing really fast. But you could do like many for loops within a for loop. But so let's say you have two lists. So we're gonna say actually we don't want to do two lists. We're gonna do here, I'll show you this way. So it's gonna be a little confusing, but let's say for x in range 1 through 11. So this is gonna be like 1 through 10. And then we can do let's put another for loop. And then we could do y in range 1 through 11. And then we could do let's create a variable called c, and then we could do c equals x times y. And then once all of this is done, we can do print c. So it prints out 100. Why is that? Because so what it basically does is that here, I'll show you what this is doing. So print x, and then we can do print y. Okay, so you what you're looking at right here, I know this is like quite complex, but actually I'll do it this way. Make this a little bit neater for you guys. So and then there you go. Okay, so I indented every time the loop starts all over again from the beginning. So what you're kind of looking at right here is for x equals to 1. So when x equals to 1, it's going to run this. So this means that for every value of x, it's going to run this many times. So just to like show you, actually to make this a little bit more simple, let me show you it this way. We're just going to do plus equals, and then let's comment this out real quick. And then this is like explain what I was trying to tell you. Plus equals to 1. So when you run this, it gives you a value of 100. So why does it give you a value of 100 when y only runs 10 times? That's because y is running 10 times at a time, but it's running like basically, so think of it this way. So when x is 1, it's going to run through this whole thing. Then the for loop's done. Now you're going to change the value of x to 2. Then you're just going to run this again. Then 3, you're going to run this again, and so forth. So that's what, when I printed like this out, that's basically what it was showing you. So when it's like indented right here, this is showing you like the value of x is 1, and it's like 1, 2, 3, 4 to like all the way to 10. Then the value of x is 2, and it's running all the way from 1 to 10. Value of 3, 10, and then like so on. So it's kind of like showing you like a for loop within a for loop. So it's kind of like I was kind of like showing you guys how like you can like make this quite complicated. So you could do this with like a list and you could like a lot of other things. So it gets complicated, but since I don't really have time to show you guys this and this session, why don't you guys give this a try at your own time? Look up, so like all of this is like really easily available on like YouTube or like Google. So if you search up like how to use for loops in Google, you could find like quite a lot of articles and try like coding it yourself and like try different things to see how for loops work. Try it with while loops, if and else statements. Create like a simple program like we did with about with like if your homework's done, right? Try something like that. And then because this is like our third and like final lesson, so next week in next class we're gonna be doing a competition where you guys will have a chance to code something. Like I'm gonna give you guys a challenge and you guys can code that, and whoever like finishes in the top three will get a prize. So try this, and then we were supposed to go through inputs, but since we didn't have enough time, what I'm gonna ask you guys to do is on your own time, search how to do input functions into Python. I'll type it in for you. So search input functions. So in Python, so this part right here. Search that, try that out, see different things, and then in next class, for like the first like 15 minutes of the class, I'll go over like questions you guys have about input, and I'll give you guys like how to use input since you're gonna need this for like the competition. And then after that, I'll give you guys the prompt for the competition and let you guys code. But other than that, thank you for attending this session and see you guys next week.